Blood Music by many is considered a science fiction horror book about a mad scientist who, while working in a biotech lab in order to build the next wave of smart computer chips using genetic material, works on his own projects, and because he spends too much time on his own scientific endeavors, he ends up getting canned. And in order to both not have to share his work with his employer, because if you are in the science world, most people have to sign contracts, not just in genetic science, but a lot of science, that if they come up with any kind of like new patent or new process, that it is a part and parcel ownership of the company that they work for and not the individual scientists that created it or scientists that create it. So in order for the company that he worked for not to get credit, and also to preserve his projects, because the projects that he's working for are biochemical in nature and thus need to be destroyed because he no longer works for the company anymore and they weren't approved projects to begin with, Virgil Ullum decides to do the only thing he could think of, given the brilliant man that he is, and inject himself with his own experiment, because that's totally a smart thing to do and not the sign of someone's own hubris to the point of self-destruction. When you get to know Virgil Ullum, it's kind of an unfortunate person to begin with, not really too blessed in the looks department, which changes after he decides to inject himself. What ensues in Blood Music is what some would consider par for the course. He ends up creating a virus, a smart virus. And I went into this book thinking that I was going to get severe body horror. I thought that it was going to be another book that gives me nightmares. For those that watched my previous review of Antibodies, that book gave me nightmares after I read it. But the body horror that was in Antibodies is of a violent and visceral nature. Definitely more macabre than the body horror in this book. The body horror and suspense in this book, I would liken it more to Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, where because of the fact that this is a virus, a smart virus, which given, we're 5 years after the coronavirus, there is definitely real terror in the thought of a smart and highly contagious virus that has such a level of self-replication that it not only does it replicate itself quickly, but hijacks the human body at the same time and completely changes the human body. But it does so, in my opinion, in a more natural way, that akin to Annihilation, because when I did the review Annihilation, and if you read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, when the main character goes into the zone, they find humanoid moss structures or fungal structures where it's very much like a natural decomposition of a body that just was hyper accelerated. And that kind of body horror and suspense is on par with the kind of body horror and suspense in this book, in my personal opinion. I was not severely grossed out by anything. I didn't need to take a breath or gasp like I did with Antibodies. And I really feel like if I had read Blood Music, first of all, when it was in the zeitgeist of BookTube, and after I had read Annihilation, I probably would have enjoyed this Blood Music a lot more, just because it would have been a more similar read. And there is recency bias in reading. I know I have that issue, because while comparison is the thief of joy, you can't, as a human being, not compare similar things to each other. And I think because of the fact that I've just finished reading Antibodies and was expecting this to be more along that lines, and it is not. That, especially given the fact that this is considered science fiction horror by a lot of people, and Antibodies by David Skal is a science fiction book by a horror historian, and that was more horrific than this. But I guess that also has to do with my own personal bias. I feel like, to me, it's more horrifying humanity's violence against each other, against ourselves, than a natural progression of a virus, even a smart virus created by humanity. Because, I mean, you know, human beings can't help but tinker with stuff that they shouldn't. So it definitely, especially 5 years after COVID, it feels... Also, I feel like maybe that might have been why, in part, this book had such a big... Like, we're still fresh off of COVID when Blood Music was having a moment here on BookTube, because it felt very prescient at the time. And now we're 5 years removed to where, yeah, I can totally see how something like this could happen and it be a natural progression, but like the shock is not there anymore. It's worn off for me. It's just like, yeah, human beings are real good at creating stuff that'll just mess us up even more. I will say Greg Bear did do something very interesting in his writing with the characters, and that he introduced main characters, and then as the main characters progressed in the storyline, he let them go the way that they let go of themselves in the story. And I thought that that was very interesting, very delicate way to do that. I can't really go into it more without spoilers, but I really liked that. That was a nice subtle touch, and I don't think a whole lot of people picked up on that when they're reading or reviewing this book. And that was a really nice writing device that he used in the book. That definitely gave me a lot of respect for his ability to write. The characters themselves, most of them were pretty dynamic and on the point. I mean, it was written in the 80s, definitely felt like it was written in the 80s. Male posturing and Silicon Valley, or I guess the 80s version of Silicon Valley, and also talking about the precursors to Silicon Valley. I thought that was really interesting and poignant. Overall, I'm glad that I read the book. It just was a victim of hype. Like, it didn't live up to the expectations I had built up for it in itself. It was still a good book. I'm still glad that I experienced it. I just am not sure it's a $50 Easton Press book for me. You know, if it's something that you think that you enjoyed enough to the point where you would like a $50 Easton Press copy, you can look in my eBay store, because this will probably end up there. Not because I dislike the book. I mean, I give it a solid 3 out of 5, but it's just, I would much rather have a hardcover copy of Antibodies on my shelf than this book. Just because Antibodies made me feel more, not necessarily in a positive way, but it made me feel more and made me think more than this book did. This book gets compared a lot to another book by Arthur C. Clarke in Themes and Structure, and I also reviewed that book on this channel by Arthur C. Clarke, and I had the same problems with it thematically that I had with this book, in that it was a little bit too predictable for me. That's what I'm saying. It's not that I don't dislike the book, this book. It didn't wow me. I expected to be wowed by this book. I expected to be moved by this book, and I wasn't. So, again, if you were, I'm so happy for you. This just wasn't it for me, and we're allowed to like different things. We're allowed to be moved by different things. We've had different life experiences. We are different people. But thank you guys so much for watching this. Hopefully y'all don't eviscerate me too hard in the comments for how my opinion is wrong and that yours is the only right one. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye. Bye.